Good morning. Welcome to Coffee Rants with Dan. I am Dan, the Spiritual Anarchist, your host, and today is already February 12th in the year of all of us, 2026. And I have a good show set up for today. You know, on this show, I've covered topics like I talk quite a bit about natural law. I plug other people who have influenced me and who I think are really fighting for human freedom and truth. I've also talked about a lot of quote unquote, and I'm using this term in the colloquial sense, not in the etymological sense. I've talked about religious things. How the 7 deadly sins aren't really deadly sins. They're warnings against excess. I've talked about my near-death experiences and actually dying and what I experienced without a body. I've talked about psychic phenomenon. It's all interlocked. It's all part of our reality, which is why I discuss it. I've talked about cryptids and some of the encounters that I have, very real encounters that I've had with cryptids. And today I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I've talked about self-defense. I've been a martial artist since I was 10 years old. A long time. I've put out my background as a ex-order follower, both military and law enforcement. So what I'm going to talk about today, I have a lot of experience with, and I'm not going to be going into metaphysical things. I'm not going to be going into natural law even. Other than what I'm going to be talking about is something that is against natural law directly, and that's lying. Okay, so as a cop, as a police officer, I had to routinely filter through people's information to get to the truth, because I know this is going to be hard to believe, but people often lie to police officers. But it's not just that. I've talked about all the contradictions on the job, why I left it after over 25 years. In police work specifically. I worked in corrections, I did contract security, I did a lot of other different things, was in the Marines. But in that specifically, because you're not only dealing with lies from the public and from the street urchins, and I used to say street urchins, and now I say that and I feel bad with the spiritual development that I've gone through in the last 15 years. But they aren't the only ones that lie to you. Your own quote unquote people lie to you. Your own allies, other cops, especially when there's promotions coming up. Trust me, plenty of mis and disinformation gets put out on purpose. It's a big game, and I'm grateful to be out of it. And I had to work through some things on forgiving myself for even allowing myself to lower myself to even be part of that fucking game. So I'm going to be talking about something that is a direct it's a direct violation of natural law, and that is actually lying and manipulating. And you could, if you wanted to really know about lies, you could just turn on the news, right? Or every time a politician speaks, you can learn about lies, right? Wrong. Because those are people who are sociopathic narcissists. They practice their lies. They practice the sell. These are people who are like snake oil salesmen. Car salesmen are big ones on this, but politicians are the top. They will practice their lies even in front of a mirror. I've seen it. I had a situation I had to deal with last year where somebody is a sociopathic narcissistic liar. And he's a good liar. Very good at what he does. So what I'm going to talk about today is going to be, how do you spot that? How do you call it out without escalating the situation? You know, my time in police work, I spent a lot of time and a lot of training with interview and interrogation. How to get a baseline if someone's telling the truth. How to get a baseline on, on what they're saying. That's plus your your normal, just energy. Like, you can feel the energy. Like, people like me, I suck at lying. I just do. I really do. I've been told I wear my my feelings on my sleeves, and I do. That's why sometimes I get mad and I'll use profanity on here and stuff like that. But at the same time, I've had to learn how to, as a cop, you're actually allowed to lie to people. Even then, I didn't do it, but people who do it all the time are so used to doing it, they would pass a lie detector test. You know, if you're practicing your lies in front of the mirror, I mean, I can't go over this enough. So what I'm going to be going over today has to do with that. But first, let me talk about some things. Again, just next Saturday is February 21st. And that is day one of the Funnel, Freedom Under Natural Law Conference, where I will have my video, The Hammer and the Flame, A Soul's Journey, is going to be getting played either that day or on Sunday. I'm not sure which day. As always, you can find my work at YouTube, on YouTube at Spiritual Anarchist Daniel AR 5907, or at the OneGreatWorkNetwork.com. Go check that out. There's over 80 content creators there. I was looking at, and this may be 2 episodes, to be honest with you. This may be discerning, truth from falsehood, part 1. And again, I'm not talking about those small lies, white lies. When your wife says, does my butt look big in these jeans? She's asking you that because she already thinks that they do. Okay? But do you have to be, if you tell the truth, can you do it in a way where it's not insulting? Or do you just tell a white lie and don't worry about it because it's not bringing any harm to anybody? Okay, there's nuances. But I went back to one of my very first episodes, and I'm in the Becoming the True Media seminar that Mark Passio is doing, and I'm blessed to be able to take that course. I'm very thankful. And it made me go back and look at some of my old stuff that I originally did in 2019. Like, I looked at my very first and second podcasts ever, and I mean ever. And from those podcasts up until, just even in the last couple of years, before I even started to take How to Become the True Media seminar, the podcasts had increased exponentially just from doing them, but also because Mark has a way of talking about these things even on his podcast. He's been teaching that on his podcast, which is why he probably decided to put this together. So over the years of listening to his podcasts, I was able to actually get better from my very first podcast to now, just based on that. But man, I was dying laughing this morning looking at my first podcast. Holy cow, is it atrocious. I might put it up just for, shits and giggles. It's bad. But there's some actual good information in it that I'm going to, talk about moving forward, as I'm just going to get into talking about this morning. There's this thing called Occam's razor. And the idea is attributed to English Franciscan Friar William of Occam back in 1287 to 1317 was his scholastic career. He was a scholastic philosopher and theologian. He used a preference for simplicity to defend the idea of divine miracles. It is sometimes, and I'm reading this, it is sometimes paraphrased by a statement like, the simplest solution is most likely the right one. But the way he uses Occam's razor as the simplest explanation is usually the right explanation, and many times it is. What I have found is there's nuance. If someone overcomplicates something, it's probably a lie. And if someone is purposely making something real simple and dismissive, that's the important thing. So simple and dismissive, that's a lie too. So there are nuances. I'll get into that stuff because you need to understand that. This isn't a blanket statement. If it's simple, it's the truth. If it's complicated, it's a lie. Now, sometimes some things need to be explained. Sometimes you have to actually put down some background information to get a point across on the simple thing that may have occurred, but it may have occurred because of several other things that happened in the past. So there can be some nuance to it. You know, it's not a blanket statement. Just by and large, the truth is simple. What else did I come across? Yeah, the 3 C's. The 3 C's. Complex. If what they're telling you is complex, confusing, or conflicting, and that's something to pay attention to. And this is all some of the stuff I talked about in that first podcast I did way back in October 2019. Now here's something, there's a phenomenon that I've seen. I've watched this with you mommies out there. There's 2 different mommies I've seen this with, okay? We could see it with people who vote. We could see it in the world happening all the time. It most certainly happens on social media. Go team, you know. But you see this thing called cognizant dissonance, and that is defined as the mental discomfort, okay, psychological stress experienced by a person who holds 2 or more contradictory beliefs, ideas, or values. The discomfort is triggered by a situation in which a person's belief clashes with new evidence perceived by that person, and it is ugly and especially distressing, and you'll see this in family and friends. They'll pretend that it's not happening. When it is occurring, there's a good chance they're also experiencing Stockholm Syndrome. So cognizant dissonance is being in a state of denial. You just ain't going to believe it even though it's the truth. I think we see that with current leaders of this country. Some people are in cognizant dissonance. They don't want to believe what their eyes are telling them. Also, everyone's so used to everyone lying that it doesn't matter when they hear a truth they don't want to hear. They can just throw it in with all the other lies that are actual lies. Okay? So cognizant dissonance defined as when you get some information that contradicts something you already held as the truth. Like, my little one would never do that. My baby would never attack somebody. Okay? Freddy Krueger and Jason from Friday the 13th, their moms think they're awesome. So cognizant dissonance is a real thing that we have to really look at. Stockholm Syndrome is the next thing. Because I think cognizant dissonance and Stockholm Syndrome can be very, very close. Because you have to be in a state of cognizant dissonance in order to have Stockholm Syndrome. And Stockholm Syndrome is defined as a condition in which hostages develop positive psychological alliance with their captors during the captivity. And it results from a bond formed between the captor and the captives during that intimate time together. They are generally considered irrational in light of the danger or risk endured by the victim. When the hostage feels that the kidnapper is not going to kill them, or feels that if they can identify with them, that they're not going to be hurt. Okay? It's almost like what governments all over the world create, Stockholm Syndrome. You need to side with either this side of us or this other side of us, or we're going to come get you. So everyone takes a side. That's Stockholm Syndrome, man. What else did I get into in this? Ego gone rogue. Yeah, I talked about ego. I'm gonna go ahead and get out of this. This is my first presentation I ever did. It's oh my god, it's hilarious. I have gotten better, even if I don't sound better right now. The weather's changing around here, so I've gotten sick again. But some of this I'm gonna be reading because I wrote it down. And I'll probably go off on my little tangents. That's why this is going to be maybe a 2-show thing. I might not be able to get through it all in just one show. But the simplicity principle of truth. Okay, the simplicity principle of truth. Truth doesn't hide. It doesn't twist itself into knots. It doesn't need a labyrinth of explanations to stand upright. Okay? Real truth is usually simple, coherent, and stable. It holds its shape no matter how you turn it. Falsehood, on the other hand, can't stand still. It must constantly rearrange itself to survive. Okay, and when it does, that's when it reveals its fingerprints of complication, convoluted, and conflicting. The 3 C's is what I call those. And I've made that up years ago, the 3 C's. So what I have is I got down some 5 ways to spot deceit instantly and how to call it out clearly with authority, but without without escalating things, because it's important in this world to not escalate something. And as soon as you got somebody feeling defensive about something, they're and you're trying to get the truth out of them, you'll know when they're lying. But it might be crucial that you get the truth. Sometimes it doesn't matter. The lie doesn't affect you. But when the lie is going to directly or indirectly affect you because it affects your family, it affects your finances, it affects your physical well-being, that is a lie that diminishes you. It hurts you. If someone says, just trust me, just trust me, believe in me, I need you to trust me and believe in me, and then they go back on their word and do some stuff, it's stealing your well-being. But here's some ways to spot deceit. I mean, this is some simple ways to spot deceit and how to call out. Number 1, the story gets more complicated the more you ask questions. So deceit requires scaffolding. When somebody is lying, every follow-up question forces them to add more detail, more backstory, more context. How to call it out. Truth doesn't need extra layers to stand. If your explanation keeps expanding, something's off. This is what you would actually say. If you're telling the truth, it doesn't need all this extra stuff. If you keep explaining and expanding on these things, something seems off. Okay? That's something to understand. Number 2, the narrative. I might get through it, maybe. Number 2, the narrative becomes convoluted. A liar's story often loops, contradicts itself, or jumps around. They can't keep their internal logic straight because there isn't any. How to call it out. And this is what you say, something along these lines. Your explanation is twisting in on itself. A true account is usually straightforward. What's going on here? All right, and it's important. I'm going to get to some, because again, these aren't blanket statements. There are some exceptions to the rules. I'll just go ahead and jump ahead real quick. I'll jump ahead real quick, and I'm not lying. Sometimes people will over-explain things if they've been the victim of trauma because they've turned into people pleasers. I've been there myself, okay? I've always said you should find that middle ground where you're not a people pleaser, you've got good solid boundaries, but you're not a dickhead either, okay? You find that middle ground. I've always said, and I believe this wholeheartedly, if you have to choose one or the other, be a dickhead and be a dickhead consistently, okay? Because fake humbleness has gotten more people killed than honest assholes have. Does that make sense? Fake humbleness will get more people killed than being a true, honest dickhead. I don't like either extreme. There is a middle ground to be found. Work on finding it. That would be my advice. Okay. Number 3, their claims conflict with each other. Contradictions, contradictory claims. Okay. Contradictions are a natural byproduct of falsehood, which is why I had to get out of police work. There was too many contradictions in it. Just like we have contradictions in our society about how people who murder people are our heroes, about how, and every country's got its heroes. Let's start looking and zooming out a little bit. Every country has its heroes that murder other people. When are we going to start coming together as a human race? And quit turning murder into a fucking team sport. And again, if you don't like my language, quit listening to me. I'm getting sick of seeing kids murdered. I'm getting sick of seeing this fucking clown show on TV with the Epstein or the retard files, as I like to call it. One side thinks it's okay to rape kids. The other fucking side thinks it's okay to blow them up. Dumbasses. Anyway, number 4. They over-explain instead of answering. Okay, again, over-explain instead of answering. If this isn't somebody who's been traumatized and they're not a people pleaser, they may attempt to over-explain something because they know they're lying. So when someone is lying, they often draw you in details. They like to actually drown you in details, tangents, emotional appeals. It's a distraction tactic. It's noise instead of clarity. How to call it out. I'm not asking for a speech. I'm asking for a clear answer. Just keep it simple. This is why when you see people address Congress or different hearings or this and that, and they ask a politician a question, the politician starts speaking in circles, and someone has to say, this is just a yes or no answer. Well, it's more complicated than you're lying. Thank you. I have no more to say. Just start calling these idiots out. But you have to know how to actually articulate it. Be able to articulate the falsehood right where it's at. Because they get you with not being able to verbally articulate it. Number 5. Oh, this is a big one. Their story requires you to ignore your own senses. What you've already seen or heard. Deceit often asks you to override your intuition, your memory. Everyone knows what gaslighting is. I've talked about that. Or what you directly observed. Truth will align with your internal compass. Lies demand you to abandon it. Okay? So if you watch somebody threaten your daughter and you have to step in, and then later on the daughter's afraid, and you're trying to say, well, you know, A, B, or C, or he wasn't going to hit you. You know, why'd you have to step in between them then if that wasn't going to happen? Okay, so that's them trying to gaslight you. This is like when you go to see a movie, okay, and you're going into a science fiction movie. Say like 1977 when Star Wars first came out. You're going to watch people use telekinetic powers to make people push with the Force and these, you know, laser swords, lightsabers, and outer space stuff, and all these different things that don't actually exist at that time frame that anyone knows of. Again, I have said that art doesn't imitate life; it reveals life. So I think there's more to everything we see than we're led to believe at first. But when you go into this movie, you have to temporarily suspend your belief systems to go in there and enjoy the science fiction fantasy film that you're watching. If you're in real life in any situation and you have to suspend that same belief system to accept what you're being told by somebody, you're being lied to on one level or another. And again, I find that narcissistic sociopaths are better at lying. I know somebody who's a car salesman. He practices his pitch in the mirror. He practices his lies in his debates. He debates himself in the mirror a couple hours at a time. This is the stuff that they do, that politicians do. Politicians are sociopaths. They will practice their speeches. Yeah, like I said, traumatized people will often develop people pleasing. They'll over-explain innocently. But here we're going to get to something else. Why do some people lie smoothly? As I'm talking about these people who can practice their lies to the point where they would pass they're not admissible in court for a lot of physiological reasons, but they would pass a polygraph exam. Or somebody like me might remember 25 years ago, I took a pack of bubble gum and I still feel guilty about it. Some people will end up feeling guilty about some of the stupidest stuff. Although that's not that in itself. I'm just using that as an example. That would still be stealing. That's still a transgression against natural law. So why do some people lie smoothly? And why do others over-explain innocently? All right. 1, practiced liars get good at performance, not truth. Someone who rehearses in a mirror, whether it's a sales pitch or an argument or a lie, is training their delivery. They're not training their honesty, because honesty doesn't take training. Everyone naturally does it. Honestly, everyone naturally does it. Okay. And sometimes if something's done wrong, there's another razor. I talked about Occam's razor, but there's also this other one called Hanlon's razor. Hanlon's razor is attribute not to malice that which can be better explained by stupidity. I've been guilty of stupidity before, not malice. Now, again, stupidity that causes you to jump in a car after drinking 24 cans of beer and smoking an ounce of pot, and you accidentally do something, that's ignorance. That's not stupidity. That's stupidity and ignorance. So, again, where was I at? Hanlon's razor. Attribute not to malice that which can be better explained by stupidity. But when something's premeditated, there's malice there. When they're practicing a lie in the mirror, there's malice there. Okay, again, they're building a lie. Their lie is training. They're training that delivery, not honesty. They're building emotional control. Okay, this is what they're practicing. They don't want to have any tells. They don't want you to be able to read them. They want to control their microfacial expressions. They want to control their mannerisms so they can get to your emotions without revealing their own. Okay? They want to have a narrative fluency with no pauses. Since I've been talking, how many pauses have I had? I've had quite a few. I do not have narrative fluency right now. This is why I have notes to be teaching this. I don't think I'll ever have narrative fluency for long periods of time. I don't practice. You can't. Because if someone's asking you a question, you might go from talking about one thing to another thing. The narratives will change. Okay, people will also practice in the mirror because some of them just like looking at themselves. They're narcissists, but they want to be able to. They're really people who are very weak and have a lot of self-doubt, very little real confidence, and they want to be able to project confidence. Okay? So this doesn't make the lie true. It just makes the performance smoother. Okay? People with narcissistic traits are strong social manipulation, or they develop traits and strong social manipulation habits. Okay, then they often do this because they want to control the situation. They fear being exposed about something. They rely, I should say, on image over substance. They treat all interactions and relationships, for that matter, like contests. They believe every relationship, somebody's the one who's in control. So there's nothing mystical about what they do. It's reps. They practice all the time. I already talked a little bit about trauma-driven people pleasers will over-explain often for no reason. But you'll be able to tell the difference, and I'm going to get to that. So where manipulators rehearse to control people pleasers, where manipulators rehearse to control, people pleasers over-explain to avoid conflict. Their over-explanation is usually fear-driven, apologetic, rambling, self-doubting. It's not deceit, it is anxiety. They're trying to preempt disappointment, anger, or rejection. So ironically, manipulators lie smoothly because they practice deception. People pleasers sound deceptive because they're terrified of being misunderstood. There's two very different energies, okay? The same surface behavior, two totally different meanings. But my 3 C's kind of cut through that, where you can recognize one from the other. Is this a people pleaser who's nervous, or is this somebody who has practiced on their lie? If I'm at a point where I get asked some kind of a question that I'm not comfortable answering, that I would want some time thinking about, I would just straight out say, I'm not comfortable talking about that right now. I'll get back to you. You don't need to know every single intimate detail of my life. But the 3 frames will let you know one from the other. Okay, this is where you'll get some clarity. When you use complication, convolution, conflict as your lens, you're not judging the person. You're evaluating the structure of what they're saying. A manipulator's lie will eventually show cracks because they can't maintain internal consistency forever. A people pleaser's over-explanation will show anxiety, not contradiction. Okay? So the framework I have here lets me separate intentional deceit from fear-based over-communication. All right? Sometimes also known as an excited utterance in law enforcement. It's one of the reasons why they tell you to keep your mouth shut. There is a million things you could say wrong that could be used against you that were innocently said that aren't anything wrong in themselves, but can be used and will be used against you. That's why we have the quote-unquote Fifth Amendment. You do have a right not to say anything. And I'm not talking about in encounters with quote-unquote authority figures. I'm talking about with anybody in your life. So somebody who fits this pattern cleanly about who is practicing, they'll practice in the mirror for hours. It isn't normal self-improvement, okay? That's not normal self-improvement. That's image crafting. Okay, it's rehearsing your control. It's building a persona. Yeah, that doesn't automatically make somebody a monster, but that does mean that they are training themselves to win interactions rather than inhabit them honestly. So I had said this on one of my podcasts before. People want to debate. Always want to debate, and the person who wins the debate is somehow seen as since they're the winner, that's obviously the truth. That's bullshit. That means they're just better at being wrong in a lot of cases. Debating does not get you to discernment. I probably would lose a debate to, oh my God, what's the dude's name now? He talks real fast. What the hell's his name? Jewish guy. Oh my goodness. It'll come back to me. That's how much I really give a shit. I would lose a debate to him. But that would not make the murder, slaughter, genocide, democide of an entire race of people correct, because I would lose a debate to him. Um, Number 5 on the second list here. I probably am going to get through all this today. I'm glad I do make notes like this because it helps me run a little bit smoother. Anyway, I hope you're getting something out of this. And just remember, even though I make lists ahead of times, and I could probably just talk off the cuff, which I've done on podcasts before about this, and I'm trying to present this in a more like structured way, is so I make sure I get the points covered that I want to cover. In my line of work, I face deception on a daily basis, and if not from the public, from the people I work with. So it's something that any cop will tell you. It's a very dirty world that they work in. And my heart goes out to y'all having done the job. I'm not against you, I'm for you. Just understand that, always. Good human beings who took an oath, and then they find out that this oath is to serve something greater than themselves that isn't good. And that's usually when a lot of them check out. That's when I checked out. Some people stick around, some people don't. But what I'm noticing, or what I've been circling here, is the truth doesn't require a rehearsal, only performance does. And performance is where deceit or insecurity lives. Okay? Understand the difference between insecurity, people pleasing, and true deceit. It's very important. Okay? So there's some real-time deceit diagnostic things you can do. Below I have some things written down. I see I got 7 of them. Yeah. And you can run this silently as like a background program while you're talking to somebody and listening to them. And each one of these things will reveal something different about their intent, their structure, their emotional agent. What do they got to gain? What are they trying to manipulate from you, possibly that they could? See, when someone's manipulating you, they feel that if they directly went for what they wanted and directly asked you what they wanted, that they wouldn't get it. So they want to try to reframe it in this way or that way or the other thing. And you'll start to feel drained when you leave them. Pay attention to that drained feeling. They may not be, these psychic emotional vampires that people will say they are, although I think those people exist. They could just be trying to get something from you, and they're not going about it in the most direct way. And eventually that'll wear you out. You'll start thinking about that. But number 1 here, do the simplicity check. Does their explanation get simpler or more tangled as you ask questions? Truth tends to compress under pressure. It gets simpler. Okay, Bruce Lee said, it's not the daily addition of things you do, it's the daily subtraction that makes you better. Cut off the fluff. Now, if it expands, you're dealing with performance, not honesty. Okay, the timeline check. Can they tell the story in the same order twice? Honest people may ramble, but the sequence stays stable. You'll get the same sequence. Liars shift order to cover gaps or adjust to your reactions. If the order keeps changing on what happened or how it occurred because of a question you asked that made them uncomfortable and they all of a sudden changed, you're being lied to. You're seeing a fabrication. All right? The anchor check. Do they reference concrete facts or do they rely on emotion, vagueness, and persuasion tactics? Manipulators will use terms like trust me. Why would I lie? You're overreacting. Everyone knows. Okay? That's what manipulators will say. You're crazy. People pleasers often say, I'm sorry, I just, da-da-da. I didn't want to upset you, but, I was afraid you would think, these are some of the ways you can tell the difference in a deception versus somebody who's people pleasing. Or a deception aimed at harming you versus a deception aimed at not feeling self-ashamed about something or something along those lines that brings no harm to anybody. You have to know what kind of lie or deception you're dealing with. If they avoid concrete answers, You're not getting the truth. You're getting strategy or fear. Okay? The mirror check. Are they speaking to you or performing at you? Okay, certain people I know fit this example perfectly. Signs of performance. Now, I'm not saying that this isn't good to do sometimes, folks. None of this is blanket statements. I went through instructional skills training where in order to graduate, you had to do a 40-minute PowerPoint presentation, and it was highly suggested that you practice it. Good teachers will often practice their delivery if you're teaching. I obviously didn't practice that today because I felt myself as I'm reading, I'm all over the place. Maybe I should practice a little bit. But anyway, you want to look for signs of performance. Did they rehearse their tone? Are they overly smooth in their delivery? Are there dramatic pauses? Okay, there's going to be a sales pitch. They're going to get to the punchline. Then they want to go into debate mode instead of conversation. That's when they're going to grab at these little ancillary topics to try to be right about and take you all off the main issue at hand. That's when you got to bring them back in, and I'm going to get to that kind of stuff too. People pleasers don't perform, they spill. Okay? Like, I want you to think of the movie Goonies and the little fat kid. They were interrogating him in the basement, and they started talking to him, and he just spilled the beans everywhere. Next thing you know, they're all laughing, and he's telling everything from his childhood, like he just confessed everything. That's people pleasers. I laugh because I've done that before personally. You're dealing with people pleasers don't perform; they will spill. If it feels like a monologue, you're dealing with someone who rehearses their narratives. I once had someone come over my place to want to debate something and didn't want to squash anything. They just wanted to win a debate, no matter who they were hurting. These are the people you got to put out of your life. All right? Do the contradiction check. Do their statements fight each other? Because truth aligns with itself. Lies eventually collide. You don't need to catch them. Just notice the friction. If two claims can't both be true, you've found the fracture. So if they're making two claims about something that they just don't go together, that's a lie. The pressure check. What happens when you ask a clean, simple question? Honest people answer directly, even if awkwardly, they answer directly. The manipulators will deflect, redirect, or they'll attack the question. Do we ever see that out of politicians? Have we ever seen manipulators? Have we ever seen deflection and redirection? Have we ever seen attack the question or attack the questioner? People pleasers will over-explain to avoid disappointing you. So remember, honest people answer directly, even if it's a little awkward. Manipulators will deflect, redirect, and attack the question. People pleasers over-explain. They don't want to disappoint you. If they can't answer simply, there's something they don't want you to see or something they don't want you to know. All right, so one of the reasons why I don't lie, I actually tell the truth even when it's quite embarrassing, to be honest, is because I'm not afraid of anything in that sense. You know, John Gotti was once quoted as saying, I don't lie. Only people who are afraid of shit lie. I'm not afraid of nothing. So that's something to think about too. What are you afraid of? What's the very worst thing that can happen if you tell the exact truth on any given thing? That's where you need to understand, are you being a people pleaser? Do you have good solid boundaries? Or are you being deceitful to yourself or others? Because these people will lie to themselves. That's how they pass polygraph exams. I knew somebody that was able to pass a polygraph exam who was stealing not only a little bit of money out of the cash register, but was also taking home like Kool-Aid and stuff from a convenience store they worked at. They passed a lie detector test. You know how they passed it? They passed it by the ends justifies the means. These people ain't paying me good enough, so screw them. They passed it. I stole some toilet paper 30 years ago. I feel guilty. I might not pass one. So, like, literally, you have to understand what you're dealing with these people. And what we're seeing in the collective from these people is a lot of redirection, a lot of attacking the question and the person asking the question or the organization they work for. It's not good. The self-reference check, okay? The self-reference check. Do they talk about what happened or how they felt about how you reacted? Okay? This is a big one when you're dealing with a narcissist. They'll do you wrong, and your reaction to their action, cause and effect, becomes the center of everything. Okay? You're allowed to get angry about things. You're allowed to get loud and mad about some things. You're allowed to be angry. Just try not to be mean. Okay? A lot of times what happens is you'll gunny bag these things. It's called gunny bagging. You let all this stuff build up. You let it build up. You let it build up. And then one thing happens and you'll explode all of it at one time. This is why I've learned let it out right then and there with the person right then and there. And I learned that the hard way. You let it out and it's over with. Later on down the road, that's not coming out as well. But, again, are they talking about what happened, or are they talking about how they felt about your reaction to what happened? Manipulators will shift the focus to your tone, your reaction, your misunderstanding, your accusation. Okay? People pleasers shift to their fear, their guilt, their worry. If they avoid the event itself, they're not standing on truth. If they give an excuse like, well, I could have planned better, but, the way A, B, and C or the collective acted after, I screwed them over was just way disproportionate to the blah, 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 blah. Nah, man. And you see this all the time on a big level, on a personal level. That's why everything in the universe is fractal. So how to call this stuff out without escalation, okay? There are 3 neutral, powerful lines that expose deceit without aggression. They're talking to you, okay, and you know it's a lie. Just say to them simply, can you walk me through that again? Simply. Just walk me through that again, because it's not all landing right. Can you just walk me through it one more time? Liars hate repetition. Truth doesn't mind. You can ask them a million times because they're going to tell you the truth a million fucking times. I'm going to tell anyone listening from experience, when you're in an adrenalized state, you probably shouldn't make statements. Let your adrenaline die down, okay? That's just something, because a lot of times there's things you will recall. If you're in a critical incident, a lot of times there's things you're going to recall a little later on that you may not recall right at the time you make a statement. And this is a fact. This is known. This is a medical, scientific, psychological fact on how most our brains work. So just give yourself time to decompress before you start making statements if something happens, okay? Now, with that being said, like liars hate repetition, truth doesn't mind. Okay, number 2. Here's something else you could say to them if you think they're lying. That doesn't match what you said earlier. Can you help me understand? So you're not accusing them, you're inviting clarity. You're not saying they're lying, you're saying that doesn't match what you said earlier. Can you help me understand? They're going to probably come back and, what do you mean? Well, this is what you said earlier, if I'm recalling correctly, and now you're saying this. Just now you said it. So, like, if I'm not recalling, can you just re-explain that? Just so I can have some clarity. I'm not trying to start nothing here. Just like, it doesn't match what you said earlier. Please help me understand. Please help me understand. All right. Next thing, and this is an important one, and it's very important. As things start to, in any situation, begin with, they could escalate. All right, because a lot of people they're addicted to that feeling of anger. They're addicted to anger because it's a more powerful feeling than shame. Shame is often weaponized. I can do a whole episode on that. Maybe I will. But they are addicted to anger, and they'd rather have that anger than anything else, and they're addicted to the adrenaline rush of it. It's not controlled, focused anger. Also, be careful about people trying to pull on your sympathies and act all sad and pathetic and pitiful. They think that that's being vulnerable. Where I think being vulnerable is just telling the fucking truth. And I don't like the truth I have to tell sometimes. But none of my truths will have ever hurt another person. See, these are people that bring harm to other people, and they don't care about it. They want to make money. It's greed. It's ego. So as they start getting more emotional, like I just did, say, hey, let's stay with the facts, not the feelings about the facts. So let's just stay with the facts of what happened, not the feelings about those facts, or the feelings about the reaction to those facts. Here are the facts. Keep it in the now. Well, I'm not, blah, 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 blah. So let's just stick with the facts. I'm not worried about the emotions behind the facts. Let's stay right where we're at. Just the facts. People are going to react in certain ways. It's normal. You're going to get emotional about things. I'm going to get emotional about things. Let's just stick to the facts as they are, and we can go from there. And maybe that'll help me understand and match what you said earlier. These are just some of the ways you can get through these. Like, I'm going to tell you right now, when you're dealing with somebody and it turns into an interrogation, they're lying. Because the truth is, boom, they'll just tell you the truth. Sometimes they don't expand enough upon it. I was once asked, did I open the door? And I just simply said, yeah. There's all kinds of explanations why what I could have said. The person's been suicidal before, you know. There's all kinds of things that could have been added to something, but sometimes you stick to just the facts and you don't explain. So everything has to be measured with this. All situations are different. But by and large, what I'm saying today is the truth is simple, usually, and lies and deceptions of one degree or another usually become more and more complicated. More and more of the 3 C's are included in the lies as the severity or consequences of those lies grows. So the bigger lies, the more they're going to hurt you with those lies, the more you're going to see the 3 C's. And one last thing here. Yeah, the 3 C's. Complication, convolution, and conflicting. So if you get a bunch of that, you're dealing with lies. If you get something simple, straight to the point, you're usually dealing with truth. Even if the person's voice shakes. We're coming up on a couple years here in the next near future. You need to start speaking the truth even if your voice shakes. Whistleblowers. People that weren't lance corporals in the Marines and specialized in strippers and beers. How about generals in intelligence, military intelligence circles? All right, that's all I got to say for today, man. Nothing but love. I'm probably talking right into it. Almost talking right into it. How about that? Anyways, hey, nothing but love, man. Peace out. Until next week, everybody. Stay safe. Peace.